There are only 7 left-handed pitchers in MLB history to win both a Cy Young Award and multiple World Series championships. 6 of them are either in the Hall of Fame or locks to get there when they become eligible. Randy Johnson, Sandy Koufax, Whitey Ford, Steve Carlton, Ron Guidry, and CC Sabathia. Legends, every single one. There's one odd man out from this group, a guy who threw one of the most beautiful pitches in baseball history, who dominated hitters with an art form disguised as a curveball, and who somehow became labeled as one of the biggest disappointments in sport, despite winning a Cy Young Award and playing crucial roles in championship teams. I'm talking about Barry Zito, the artist who painted masterpieces on the mound for over a decade. Maybe we've gotten the story all wrong. Maybe the narrative of Barry Zito isn't about failure at all. Maybe it's about what happens when pure artistry meets a world obsessed with power. He was the ace on one of the most dominant rotations in modern baseball history, the centerpiece of the Moneyball A, and the clutch hero when his career was on the line. This isn't a rise and fall story. This is the story of how baseball's most unique artist carved out a legacy that transcends wins and losses. And before we dive in fully, as always, make sure to leave a like on today's video and subscribe if you've been enjoying my recent content. Leave a comment with your favorite Barry Zito memory, and maybe I'll cover your player suggestion next. Now, let's talk about the most misunderstood pitcher of his generation. The phrase "born to pitch" gets thrown around way too casually in baseball, but Barry William Zito might be the literal definition. Growing up in San Diego, Zito wasn't your typical power-throwing prospect. At USC, he didn't overwhelm hitters with velocity. He hypnotized them with one of the most devastating curveballs college baseball had ever seen. That curveball was special from day one. We're talking about a pitch that dropped from the clouds like it was falling off a table. A true 12-6 hammer that hitters knew was coming but still couldn't hit. Former USC hitting coach Dave Lawn once said that facing Zito's curveball was like trying to hit a pitch that changed its mind mid-flight. The Oakland Athletics saw something special and took him 9th overall in the 1999 draft. But here's what made Zito different from other first-round picks. He wasn't drafted for what he might become. He was drafted for what he already was, a finished product with a pitch that was basically unhittable when he commanded it. By 2000, just 1 year after being drafted, Barry Zito was in the major leagues, not because the A's were desperate, but because his curveball was so dominant that keeping him in the minors would have been criminal. His first major league start came against the Anaheim Angels, and he struck out 7 batters in 5 innings. Nothing flashy, but that curveball was already making big league hitters look foolish. What the A's and their fans didn't know yet was that they had just witnessed the beginning of something truly special. Zito wasn't just another pitcher. He was about to become the ace of one of the most legendary rotations in baseball history, and his curveball was going to be the signature pitch of an entire era. The 2001 season changed everything for Barry Zito and baseball history. This was the year the Big Three was born: Zito, Tim Hudson, and Mark Mulder, forming what would become the most dominant rotation in Oakland Athletics history and one of the best in modern baseball. But here's what people forget. Barry Zito was the ace of this rotation. Not Hudson, who was steady and reliable. Not Mulder, who had the better fastball. It was Zito, with that devastating curveball, who was the most dominant pitcher of the group during their peak years. In 2001, Zito went 17-8 with a 3.49 ERA and 205 strikeouts. More importantly, he became the pitcher opposing teams feared most. Hitters would rather face Hudson's sinker or Mulder's four-seam fastball than try to time Zito's curveball. The pitch was so good that veteran hitters would take called strike 3 rather than swing and miss embarrassingly. Tony Phillips, a 16-year veteran, once said that Zito's curveball was the best he'd ever seen, and that included facing guys like Bert Blyleven and Dwight Gooden in their prime. This wasn't hyperbole. This was a work of art disguised as a baseball pitch. The A's Big Three combined for 57 wins in 2001, but it was clear that Zito was emerging as something special. While Hudson and Mulder were excellent pitchers, Zito was becoming an artist. Every curveball was painted with precision. Every at-bat was a chess match between pitcher and hitter. By the end of 2001, Barry Zito had established himself as one of the most unique talents in baseball. But what happened next would cement his place in baseball history and prove that sometimes art really can conquer all. If Barry Zito's curveball was a work of art, then the 2002 season was his Mona Lisa. This was the year that the baseball world finally understood what Oakland had known for 2 seasons. They were watching one of the most dominant pitchers in the game. Zito didn't just have a good season in 2002. He had an historically great one. He went 23-5 with a 2.75 ERA and 182 strikeouts in 229 1/3 innings. But those numbers only tell part of the story. The real story was how he was winning games. That curveball had reached peak form. Hitters weren't just struggling against it, they were completely helpless. Zito would throw it in any count, at any time, and hitters could do nothing but hope they could make contact. His curveball was so good that he could throw it for strikes when hitters were expecting it and still get swings and misses. The 23 wins tied for the most in the majors that season, but it was how he got those wins that made Zito special. He wasn't overpowering hitters with 98-mile-per-hour fastballs like some of his contemporaries. He was outsmarting them, out-artsing them, making them look foolish with a pitch that moved like it was defying physics. Pedro Martinez, who was having his own dominant season with Boston, said that Zito's curveball was the best pitch he'd seen all year. Coming from Pedro, that was the ultimate compliment. This wasn't just about velocity or movement. This was about artistry at the highest level. When the Cy Young votes were counted, Barry Zito had won his first and only Cy Young Award, beating out Pedro Martinez, future Hall of Famers in the prime of their careers. At just 24 years old, Zito had reached the absolute peak of his profession. His acceptance speech was vintage Zito, humble, artistic, talking about baseball as more than just a game. He thanked his teammates, his coaches, and specifically mentioned how the curveball had become an extension of his personality. This wasn't just about winning an award, this was about validating an entire approach to pitching. But here's what made Zito's Cy Young season even more special. He was doing it as part of the Big Three, helping lead the A's to 103 wins in an AL West title. This wasn't individual success at the expense of team success. This was a perfect marriage, personal artistry, and team achievement. The artist had created his masterpiece. Now, it was the time to see if that artistry could translate to October magic. While the world was celebrating Barry Zito's Cy Young Award, something bigger was happening in Oakland. The A's weren't just winning with great pitching, they were revolutionizing how baseball teams were built, and Zito was at the center of it all. The Moneyball A's weren't supposed to compete with teams like the Yankees or Red Sox, who had 3 times their payroll, but they had something those teams didn't: 3 starting pitchers who could match any rotation in baseball, anchored by Barry Zito's unhittable curveball. From 2002 to 2004, the Big Three were the most dominant rotation in baseball. They combined for 189 wins over those 3 seasons, with Zito leading the way. But it wasn't just about the wins. It was about how they were making every dollar count for a small market team. Zito's curveball became the signature pitch of the Moneyball era. While other teams were chasing expensive free agent sluggers, the A's had found their ace in the draft and developed him into a Cy Young winner. This was proof that scouting, development, and understanding what makes a pitcher special could compete with unlimited payrolls. The 2002 playoffs showcased exactly why Zito was so valuable. In his first playoff start against the Twins, he threw 7 innings, striking out 8 batters and allowing just 4 hits. That curveball was even more devastating in October when every pitch mattered. But here's what made Zito's Moneyball legacy even more impressive. He wasn't just succeeding with his curveball, he was inspiring a generation of pitchers to embrace finesse over power. Young pitchers around the country were trying to copy his 12-6 curveball, understanding that you don't need to throw 100 miles per hour to dominate major league hitters. From 2000 to 2006, Barry Zito was one of the most consistent pitchers in baseball. He made at least 32 starts every single season, threw at least 210 innings 5 times, and won at least 11 games every year. For a small market team that needed to maximize every asset, Zito was the perfect pitcher, reliable, durable, and dominant when it mattered most. The Moneyball A's couldn't have existed without Barry Zito. His curveball wasn't just a pitch. It was proof that intelligence and artistry could compete with raw power and unlimited budgets. He was the ace that made everything else possible. But every great story has its turning point. And for Barry Zito, that turning point came when the biggest contract in Giants history changed everything. December 29, 2006, Barry Zito signs a 7-year, $126 million contract with the San Francisco Giants, the largest contract in franchise history at that time. The baseball world was divided. Was this the Giants getting a proven Cy Young winner, or were they overpaying for a pitcher whose best days were behind him? The pressure was immediate and intense. Zito wasn't just expected to be good. He was expected to be worth $18 million per season. Every start was analyzed. Every bad outing was magnified. Every strikeout was measured against that massive contract. Here's where the narrative usually goes wrong. The conventional wisdom says that Barry Zito was a bust in San Francisco, that he couldn't handle the pressure, that the contract was a disaster. But that story misses the bigger picture entirely. Let's look at what actually happened. Yes, Zito's first few seasons with the Giants were inconsistent. His ERA was higher than his Oakland day, and that curveball wasn't quite as sharp. But here's what the critics miss. Barry Zito was still Barry Zito. In 2009, Zito threw one of the most beautiful games of his career against the Padres. 8 innings with that curveball working like it was 2002 all over again. The problem wasn't that Zito lost his ability. The problem was that expectations had become impossible. The media wanted power pitcher dominance from an artist. They wanted 2002 Cy Young numbers every single season from a pitcher who had always been about more than just statistic. They were judging a painter by the standards of a photographer. What makes Barry Zito's Giants years even more impressive is how he handled the criticism. He never complained, never made excuses, never blamed anyone else. He continued to work on his craft, continued to perfect that curveball, and waited for his moments to prove that the artist was still there. By 2010, the Giants had built something special around their rotation. They had Tim Lincecum winning Cy Young Award, Matt Cain throwing perfect games, and Barry Zito providing veteran leadership and crucial innings. This wasn't about individual stats anymore. This was about building a championship team. The Giants won the 2010 World Series, their first championship since 1954. Barry Zito didn't pitch in the playoffs due to inconsistency, but his veteran presence and regular season contributions were part of that championship foundation. But the artist wasn't done. In fact, his greatest masterpiece was still 2 years away. October 19, 2012, Game 1 of the National League Championship Series. The San Francisco Giants are facing elimination after losing the first 3 games to the St. Louis Cardinals. Their season is on the line, and who gets the ball? The bust, the overpaid veteran, the artist who had been waiting 5 years for this moment. Barry Zito took the mound knowing that this could be his last meaningful start as a Giant. The criticism, the contract pressure, the years of being labeled a disappointment. It all came down to this one game. What happened next was pure artistry. For 7 2/3 innings, Barry Zito was vintage Barry Zito. That curveball was dancing. His fastball was precisely located, and Cardinals hitters were looking like little leaguers trying to time a pitch from a different dimension. He allowed just 6 hits and 1 run, striking out 6 batters and walking none. But the numbers don't capture what really happened that night. This was a pitcher proving that artistry never truly disappears. it just waits for the perfect moment to resurface. Pablo Sandoval hit 2 home runs that night, but everyone knew who the real hero was. Barry Zito had saved the Giants' season with the kind of performance that reminds everyone why he won a Cy Young Award in the first place. The Giants won that game 5-0, and suddenly the series was alive. More importantly, Barry Zito was alive. The artist had created another masterpiece when it mattered most. 4 days later, Zito started again. Another crucial game, another artistic performance. 5 innings, keeping the Giants in the game. The Giants swept the Detroit Tigers in the World Series, and Barry Zito had his second championship ring. But this one was different. This one was earned not with Cy Young level dominance, but with clutch performances when his team needed him most. After the World Series victory, Zito was asked about his performance in the NLCS. His response was perfect. I've always believed that baseball is about moments, not seasons. Sometimes the moments find you when you least expect it. That's the real Barry Zito story. Not the contract numbers or the regular season statistics, but the artist who painted his greatest masterpieces when his team needed it most. Barry Zito retired after the 2015 season with 165 wins, a Cy Young Award, and 3 World Series championships. His career ERA was 4.04. His curveball was legendary, and his impact on baseball extended far beyond any statistic. He won't make the Hall of Fame, and that's okay, because Barry Zito's legacy isn't about Hall of Fame worthiness. It's about proving that there's more than one way to dominate in baseball. His curveball inspired a generation of pitchers to embrace finesse over power, artistry over raw ability. The narrative that Barry Zito was a disappointment is fundamentally wrong. He was a Cy Young winner who helped anchor one of the greatest rotations in modern baseball history. He was a clutch performer who delivered championship moments when they mattered most. He was an artist who painted with a baseball. Today, when young pitchers learn to throw curveballs, they study Barry Zito's grip and release point. When teams look for finesse pitchers who can win with location and movement rather than velocity, they remember how Zito dominated with an 86-mile-per-hour fastball and a curveball that dropped off the table. Barry Zito proved that you don't have to throw 100 miles per hour to win a Cy Young Award. You don't have to be perfect every start to be valuable to a championship team. And you don't have to fit the traditional mold of power pitcher to leave a lasting impact on the game. The artist's journey is complete, but the masterpiece he created, that perfect curveball, those clutch performances, that proof that intelligence and artistry can conquer raw power, that masterpiece will inspire baseball players and fans for generations to come. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Barry Zito's career. Sometimes the best stories aren't about perfect statistics. They're about the artist who changed the game in ways that can't be measured. And Barry Zito, he was one hell of an artist. This deep dive into baseball's most misunderstood pitcher resonated with you. Smash that like button and let me know in the comment below. What other underrated or misunderstood players would you like to see me cover next? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest breakdowns of baseball's greatest stories and forgotten legends. Share this video with any baseball fan who needs to understand why Barry Zito deserves way more respect than he gets. Until next time, keep appreciating the art in America's pastime.